Underwriting support for this program is brought to you by the City of Eureka, the Victorian Seaport. Visit their website at ci.eureka.ca.gov.
Cliff Clendenin, unfortunately, is in bed with a fever. Bill tells me I'm in charge, so that should give us all pause. So we're here today for the third leg of our presentations regarding the Humboldt Bay Rail Corridor. And we don't have a formal agenda, but we are going to hear first from John Williams of NWP Co. He's going to be making a presentation. That will be followed by a presentation by Timber Heritage Association, who I think has one of the most developed plans of how some rail service could be provided around the bay. We are then going to hear from, and I think Pete Johnston will be making that presentation. Then we're going to hear a presentation from CalTrans regarding the Corridor Safety Project, and I believe Kim Floyd will be making that presentation. And that's one of the key pieces of how some funding might be obtained to do what a variety of different groups would like to do. Then we're going to hear a brief presentation from East West, and I'm not sure who will be doing that. Dave. Okay. Mitch Angelo. Okay.
Can you do it without the mic? I think it's a small enough room. I mean, it's only a...
Sure.
Unless you're going to break into song. But.
Well, that'd clear the room. And then the final leg will be a presentation by the Bay Trail Advocates by Reese Hughes, is it? So without further ado, we're going to get started. Mr. John Williams, NWP Co, if he's ready to go, or when he's ready to go. Can you turn that to the microphone?
Turn one of the microphones off. Turn all of them off.
Sorry about that.
And this is really slow, so it has to
get out of the way.
I have to say they did very good
work from over there. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's all yours.
Good morning, I'm John Williams. I'm president of the Northwestern Pacific Railroad Company, and I've been invited to speak. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, and if people want copies, we can arrange that. I wanted to start by giving you a little of the background of the NWP, because not everybody knows the same background. It is a new company using an old name, and if you go back 100 years, the railroad that used to operate in and out of Eureka was called the Northwestern Pacific Railroad Company. The name was abandoned sometime in the 90s, so when we came along to form our new company, I said, well, why not make it the old name? So we are, today, we resurrected the name, and we are the Northwestern Pacific Railroad Company. I am personally the largest investor in the company. In terms of my experience and our experience, I was the managing director and executive director and the CFO of both the North Coast Railroad Authority and the North Coast Railroad when we operated from Eureka to Willits in the early 90s. I was in that position for a couple of years. And during that time, we operated 2 freight trains a day around the bay from Eureka to Samoa and back. And we operated frequent passenger excursion trains in the same territory between Eureka and Samoa, and also occasional service to and from Scotia. The excursion passenger train service was a success. The whole division that we were operating, the Eel River Division, was marginally profitable, but the contribution made by the excursion passengers train service, although not enough to cover all of the costs of any railroad operation in the area, did make a positive contribution to net income and cash. Continuing with our background, the basic legal rights we have are for NWP Co. is a lease to operate the entire NWP. On September 13, 2006, we entered into that lease. And our current lease has about 18 years to run. The first phase was 5-6 years, and then it was renewed and had a 20-year term. The next couple of terms are 25 years each. So anyway, we're in place with 18 years to go on our existing lease. The lease applies to the entire NWP line, although it's broken into 3 pieces. The first piece is from Brazos Junction, American Canyon, some people call it, Lombard, some other people call it, 142 miles north of Willits. That's the basic lease. Then we have an option on something called Eel River Block, which is also referred to as the Canyon, and that option extends from Willits to South Fork. Then there's a third option, which is perhaps of the greatest interest today, called the Humboldt Bay Block option. Also, I refer to this option as the north end, but it extends from South Fork at milepost 237 point something or other, all the way into Eureka, Arcata, Samoa, and Fairhaven. So that's the basis of our legal rights to operate. And I'd like to turn now and say a few words about our current rail operations and plans. As item A says, we are a common carrier, and we're certified by the Surface Transportation Board on September 7, 2007. That is an important factor. A person can't just start a railroad. You have to be certified that you are a railroad, and the certifying agency is the Surface Transportation Board. We do connect as a common carrier of freight service. We do connect to the National Rail System and the Union Pacific Railroad System through our Brazos Junction interchange. We restarted rail operations on July 13, 2011. Restarted, ran our first train, had 5 carloads of grain, have since grown from that level. And we currently operate over 61 miles, extending from Brazos Junction, south of Napa, or near American Canyon to Windsor. So that was an exciting time for us, and it took us a long time to do it, as I'll explain in a little bit. What are we doing now? Well, we operate trains 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the demand for our service. We're also developing a business plan at present that could further extend NWP's existing service northward from Windsor. We're looking at it extended 5 miles maybe from Windsor to Healdsburg, or maybe 15 miles from Windsor to Geyserville, or maybe 23 miles from Windsor to Cloverdale. What has to go into developing that business plan is first an assessment of what it would take to get the track back in condition so we could provide our rail service. Second, and really the hardest part, is to assess the market. What is the market for the service? Who are the potential customers? And who is going to want to have rail service? As one of my prospective customers told me, he said, "Rail," when I walked in to see him, he said, "Rail, we haven't thought of you in 15 years. We'd have to put you back in our thinking loop." So that's one of the problems that we have to deal with. The third component of a good business plan is financial projections. And that's where you tie everything together with money. What will it cost to put the railroad in service? What will the revenue projection be? What will the expenses be projected-wise? And then out at the end come the three usual financial statements: a balance sheet, a cash flow statement, and an income statement. And when that's all done, you have a business plan. In general, I say it takes 3 or 4 months to do a normal business plan. Some business plans take longer. So let me turn and summarize the pain and suffering from restarting NWP's freight service. Actually, I called it lessons, not pain and suffering. But first and foremost, it took us time to put this piece of railroad back in service. It took us 5+ years. I don't think it necessarily has to take 5+ years. I think it could be done in 2. But we had a lot of problems, including litigation, environmental litigation, and we also were, if I may say, inexperienced at putting all the pieces together that are necessary to restart rail service. So time is an important factor. The second factor that is very, very important is money. I call it capital. But you have to have capital to build and maintain this railroad. And you have to have money, an ongoing flow of money to maintain the railroad and keep it in service. In terms of capital, Dave Anderson has estimated, provided his estimates of the capital that would be required to put the railroad back in service. And I don't disagree with Dave. I mean, he's in the ballpark given the amount of time he could spend on the project. But money's important, time is important. Oh, and I'd say I'd add you need an investor, which I have fulfilled on the south end, but you need somebody who's willing to put up equity capital, risk capital to start a new operation. Here's some other things. Here's some other things that also have to be done. You have to be recertified as an operator from a safety perspective by the Federal Railroad Administration. This whole railroad was shut down from Brazos Junction to Arcata in 2002 by the order of the Federal Railroad Administrator. This is not just a piece of paper. In order to get that emergency order lifted, and we got it lifted for our current operations from Brazos Junction to Windsor, we went through excruciatingly detailed inspections. And that was inspections not only of the tracks, the grade crossings, the bridges, but of the people. Were the people trained? Did the FRA people think these people knew how to maintain and operate the railroad safely? So we did the job. Our biggest issues were grade crossing signals, track, and drainage, but the training and the assessment of people was just as important. In fact, more so probably. In the end, we had to and have to operate our railroad by the book. And by the book means by FRA's book, not by our book. So those are some of the lessons. There are a few others that are also important. up front would be the marketing arrangements with the rail customers. I mean, who is going to use the service? And what do they want to carry? And what is the market? How much volume will they have? And that in turn determines how many freight cars you have to have of a certain type to carry the goods, and locomotives to haul the trains. So the marketing arrangements with rail customers looks like a two-line item on my sheet, but it's really the most complicated part of doing a business plan. And I didn't call everything right when I did our business plan on the existing railroad, but I called enough right, so we're still in business. Second point is agreements with connecting railroads, barges, and shippers. Usually there's an interplay, interchange between some of the different modal carriers. If we were dealing with simply a railroad like the existing NWP, we have a connecting agreement with the Union Pacific Railroad system. That makes it easy. If we were doing an around the bay railroad up here with no connections into the national rail system, we would have to determine whether we need a connection, and it would be a rail, barge, rail sort of move. But I'm sure we'd need arrangements with barges, we'd need arrangements with truckers, and other modes of transportation. The third item on the list is selecting, hiring, and training railroad people. This probably should be number one on the list, except I put marketing number one on the list. When we went out to try and find a cadre of people to start up our railroad, to fix it up and finish off the construction project, we got 61 applications from people from the Oregon border all the way to Southern California. We ended up picking 5 or 6. And in time we grew up to 8, and then we shrank back as the construction project finished. But the people we have are dedicated to the railroad. They work hard. They maintain the track some days. They run the trains some days. So that sort of cross-job classification is pretty unusual in the business. And the guys, frankly, have to be willing to do it. But they do, and they're very good at it. The last point on my list was compliance with the environmental consent decree. That decree was issued sometime in the 90s, and it applies to the railroad. To me, what that means is we would have to have a SWIP, a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and we had to have that on the south end when we put it in service, plus whatever else is required to comply with the environmental consent decree. So those are the lessons that I think I learned anyway from restarting our freight service. Now, taking some of my experience and those lessons, let me address the rail service on the north end. So far as my thinking is concerned, our objective is to operate a short line railroad in the Humboldt Bay area between South Fork and Samoa. That involves 67 miles of rail line, and it requires more than $30 million for repairs of grade crossing signals, track, bridges, and culverts. So that's about $500,000 a mile, and that's generally where Dave Anderson came down with his estimates on the segment just between Samoa and Eureka. So you have to fix up the railroad, in other words. Second, what will be operated? Well, I've said before, I thought the excursion passenger train service that was operated here in the 90s by NCRA was a success, a financial success as well as a community success in terms of attracting visitors and attracting visitor spending to the area. I think that market still exists. I think it's larger if anything. But I think it's a very attractive component of a service being operated in the Bay Area. I'd operate at least between Eureka and Samoa, and I think should partner with a proven passenger excursion train operator. I see THA as a proven passenger train operator, but there are others. I see passenger excursion trains, going back to my own experience between Eureka and Samoa, but also occasional trips to Scotia. I think those are magnificent routes, and in an area that's unusually beautiful and attractive. I don't know, I haven't done any work on the estimated volumes, but when I think back to what we did in the early 90s and look around, I think 50 to 60,000 riders in a year is a reasonable expectation, and perhaps more depending on who the or how the operation is to be run. And you remember, I'm not a very good economist anymore, but you remember when you take the expenditures from visitors in an area, and this applies whether you're running an excursion passenger train or you have people coming in to walk on trails, they bring expenditures for food and lodging and so on and so forth into the area. There's a multiplier effect to the further benefit of the community, because the visitors go and spend money at the grocery store or at restaurants, and then that money in turn is spent for other services. So there's a multiplier, and whether it's 5 or 10 times the actual expenditures is something I'd leave to the economists, but I think it's an indication of the value of bringing visitors to your area. Because even as good as it sounds, I don't think the economics permit coverage of the fixed track costs and some of the technical FRA costs from the operation of an excursion passenger train. I say NWP Co would provide operational and technical support. For instance, we'd have to agree with our partner, but it's likely we'd perform the track inspections to satisfy FRA. So turning to the freight service, I'd also, in this round the bay scenario, I'd also operate freight service, and the general geography to be served is between South Fork and Fairhaven. The commodities, as we've looked at it, are lumber, logs, construction materials, and aggregate. I think a rail barge transfer here in the Eureka area would probably be needed in order to move some of those commodities out or into the area. There's another idea that's been floated since I last did a lot of work on this, and that's the East-West Railroad. And to me, that's an idea that's worth considering, and I've said so. The attribute that this East-West Railroad has, from my point of view, is it would connect to the core piece of the Union Pacific Railroad 125 or 150 miles away. And that's less than half the distance it takes to get over the existing NWP down through Willits to Suisun Fairfield. So that's a big advantage time-wise for moving the commodities, and it's also an advantage from a cost standpoint. Does it make sense? Well, I don't know. Does it make sense? But I don't think it should be discarded out of hand. I think someone ought to put together the basic feasibility analysis that says, does it make sense? It costs a lot of money. Can you attract enough traffic? Well, have to see. So I do not think it should be discarded out of hand because it is immensely attractive as an alternative means of serving the Humboldt Bay area. The East-West Railroad would need access to the Humboldt Bay block of the NWP, and it's just a question of where would the connection be made, and how much traffic did they see distributing over our existing network. I don't see a real problem with getting an agreement on that, however it's done. So my conclusion, looking at the charge of the committee, the charge was consider whether it was feasible to restore rail service in the Humboldt Bay corridor. And I say, based on my knowledge and experience, and I do claim to be a railroad expert, I may not have all the facts and figures that are desired for every analysis, but I have testified before the Surface Transportation Board, the Interstate Commerce Commission, and I've been in business long enough that I am considered a railroad expert. So my expert opinion, based on my knowledge and experience, is yes, it is feasible to restore the rail service in the corridor. And I say that, first of all, physically, putting this railroad back together is just a duplication of what we did on the South End rehabilitation project. Yes, the money is different. Yes, the components of the project are a little different. But I say physically we've shown we can do it, and I say it can be done up here. Operationally, yes, it's feasible to restore the service from an operational standpoint. I mean, that's what my company did, NWP Co. Determined how to satisfy the FRA, how to get certified, how to handle the environmental constraints, how to hire and train locomotive crews, track crews, how to purchase locomotives, lease locomotives. So can we restore the Humboldt Bay Railroad from an operational standpoint? Well, I'd say yes. I mean, we've done it. We know how. Financially is the harder one. Can we restore, is it feasible to restore the rail service in the Humboldt Bay area financially? The big elephant in the room is the cost of rehabilitation. And I say, if low-cost funding for rehabilitation can be obtained, the operating railroad will produce a positive cash flow. And I say that just based on the number of analyses I've been through and my experience working in the area. But I don't think, the rehab number I'm dealing with is $30 million. I don't think we can cover $30 million out of the revenue stream. So that is the issue. And it has been the issue for a long time, as I would see it. But that is my presentation, and if there are questions, here am I. Yes?
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Williams for his presentation. And I share your belief that currently, without a connection to the national rail line, it's difficult to see how the local rail service, excursion, freight, whatever we can come up with, will capitalize the full cost of repairs. Do you have any kind of a ballpark of the amount that you think local rail service could capitalize, and what would the low-cost funding have to be? What target interest rate and what amount of capital? And just, you know, I know it's a real ballpark figure.
And this is as a standalone around the bay?
Yes.
Is your question? Well, I'd say just looking at the past, I'd say railroad should be able to generate a couple of $1 million in revenue. And that won't finance $30 million.
Underwriting support for this program is brought to you by the City of Eureka, the Victorian Seaport. Visit their website at ci.eureka.ca.gov.
In rehabilitation, $30 million of rehabilitation. If you say the debt service is 10% of it, that's $3 million a year. So the numbers don't cash flow. If the $30 million were grant funds or a mix of grant and low-cost interest borrowings, it could work.
But again, do you have any idea how much the local rail service might be able to repay? You know, if it was $10 million at 3% interest, would that be achievable, or?
What I heard you say, John, was you thought it could generate a couple $1 million worth of business. And you'd have $3 million a year in debt service.
Well, on $30 million at 10%, but you know, lower cost financing, and if different grant funds or other sources of revenue, you know, because frankly, we certainly didn't rebuild the southern part of the line simply on an investment basis. You know, we were fortunate to get significant funding from other sources that don't have to be paid back. And that's going to be, I think that'll be the key to making things work locally around the bay.
Yeah, well, I think the answer to your question is a function of the type of traffic you have on the railroad and the margins you can generate. I'd say you should be able to finance maybe $5 million out of the operation. And maybe we could figure out how to rehabilitate the railroad for less than what has been estimated. It's been a long time since people have been able to see through the weeds, see what's really out there, to figure out how to put the line back in service. Yes?
You mentioned the possible freight loadings, aggregate, lumber, logs. I think there was one of your construction materials. Just for my own edification, construction materials, pretty generic term. What are construction materials in this instance?
Oh, it could be plywood or something like that.
Oh, okay. So,
plasterboard.
all right. So my question is, I mean, has anybody with the railroad talked to California redwood or Humboldt redwood? I mean, the two larger mills in the area, Sierra Pacific, to see if in fact they are interested in rail service. They're obviously doing business with trucks now. Do we know if rail is viable to them?
No, I'd say that's the chicken and egg proposition we're faced with. We need, in order to get the shippers to participate in considering rail as an alternative, as a real alternative, they want to know, is there money there, is it likely to be money there to fix up the railroad? Because otherwise they're just wasting their time. So until NCRA can go with NWP Co to the shipping community and say, we think we could get our hands on X million of money, and that's when you do the business plan and you get down to, okay, if we can rehabilitate with this much money and we can provide this kind of service, will you support us, and by how much with traffic?
Logs, I assume, would be going to Asia by barge?
I presume by ship.
Could you speak up a little bit for a second?
Next.
Any questions?
Yes?
What do you see as the responsibilities of the NWP Co to maintain the right-of-way, even though you're not operating on it currently? And that would sort of relate to the Eureka to Samoa stretch of the trail in particular.
Well, right now we have no responsibilities. The lease was written, we didn't assume the maintenance responsibilities on any section of the line until that section had been rehabilitated. So right now it's NCRA's responsibility to maintain.
And that would also apply to rehabilitation responsibilities as well?
Yes. Yes.
I was wondering what you saw as a timeline for when you would consider, or when NWP would consider exercising your option around the bay, seeing how the next priority is to get to Geyserville or Cloverdale, that, and when you would expect to have a business plan.
In terms of exercising our option, we'd exercise our option if we were convinced there were a business opportunity for us. I don't see us doing a business plan until we have some indication that there's public money of some kind or other to rebuild the railroad up here. I see our process of getting in service down in Cloverdale or wherever we decide to go as being a year long or whatever. I don't see that as very long. But I can't really take my resources and divert my resources that I do have to doing a business plan up here if it's just going to be another study that goes on bookshelf.
John, I'm going to jump in here because I've got one thing that's not clear in my mind. When you were just kind of trying to suggest some numbers to create a framework there, and you were suggesting that the rehab cost would be 30 million. That's the rehab from Eureka around to Fairhaven?
No, that's from South Fork.
The whole run, okay.
All the way up.
Okay, the whole north of Eureka. Okay, and then one more quickie, and then I'll turn it back. You have options under the 2000 agreement as amended. And it was my understanding that you had basically exercised your option to for the north end as well as the south, or is that not the case?
No, we exercised. The initial term of the entire lease was 5 years. We exercised. We had an option to extend into a second term, 20 years. We exercised that option.
Which includes the north end?
Yeah, but we have never said we want to take over the north end by exercising that option. We've never said we want to take over the canyon by exercising that option.
Okay. Questions galore.
When you say $30 million to rehab, does that just include the physical reconstruction, or how much would it cost to deal with the environmental consent decree and environmental permitting? Are you considering those figures as well?
Well, yeah, I guess I'd say 30 million was basically construction costs with a little add-in for permitting and so on. I watched and listened to Merritt talk about the permitting costs and the additive that he would place on the construction costs for trail. And I guess I don't really know whether that applies to a railroad that's trying to come back into service or not. But those are big numbers, and if that same multiplier, which is about 100% according to Merritt, applies, then my 30 million is too low.
And what about the consent decree complying with that? I don't really have a good sense for how much that would actually cost.
Well, it cost us $250,000 to do it last time. We think we're a little bit smarter, but yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yes?
How long did the recertification process for by the FRA take? Do you remember?
Well, it doesn't have a clearly defined beginning it does have a clearly defined ending. They say, yes, you're certified or not. But you start with your plan to rebuild the railroad, and you go to FRA and you tell them we're rebuilding the railroad and we are going to come back for certification. And therein starts a process in which they come out and look at the work as it goes along. But until we actually called for an inspection and said, okay, we're ready to be inspected, we think everything's perfect. They came out on January 7th, I think it was, 2011, and we found 3 or 4 dozen defects, which any good inspector does. And then we had to fix those, and it took us till May to get it done.
Of that same year?
Yeah, so I'd say in terms of your question, the strict answer to it is it took from January to May, which is 4 or 5 months. Yeah.
Hey, John. So you said if there was public funding, it could make this economically viable up here on the north end. Was there public funding for the portion on the south end? And I was just curious what the difference between the two would be, and maybe what the likelihood would be of finding that.
Well, there was public funding on the south end. I think what went into the track was something like $40 million on the south end. But, you know, it seems to me that whether you're trying to build a railroad or rebuild a railroad, or whether you're trying to build a trail, the issue is still about money. You need public money to make these things work. And it is infrastructure money. I mean, highways, railroads, waterways have always been built with money that comes from a general fund, not the project-specific type allocation. So it seems to me we're all in the same boat when it comes to trying to fund whichever or both projects. I guess I see the railroad is going to need some kind of public funding to restore the infrastructure. And I see that as the obligation of the NCRA.
Was the public funding having to do more with the fact that ultimately that would become a commuter route as well?
No.
Just purely based on freight service?
Yes. Smart was considered separately and is a separate matter by the legislature and the governor.
I saw we had a question in the back row there.
John Woolley.
Have you had, with all this great work going on by this committee to look at trail costs, if you will, and then now with your numbers, have you thought perhaps how there's a way that you could put those projects together so, in a sense, you're in the right-of-way at one time working on both rail and trail? And if so, would that help with the cost factors for both?
Well, I listened to Karen Deemer talk about that, and I think there's no question there's savings if you can put both projects on the same timeline, which is not as easy as it sounds. There are savings. I don't know how much they are, and the experts talking in the last session didn't seem to know either. But I think, yes, running the 2 projects in parallel, yes, there are savings.
Marcel and then Tom.
Do you happen to know if it was funded through the Recovery Act program or Prop 1B?
TCRP.
And it was TCRP part of Prop 1B, I think? So those were...
The money spent to restore the South?
Yes.
Yeah, it was TCRP. I didn't realize that was a subset of something else.
Okay.
Not Recovery Act.
So possibly, I think it might be related to Prop 1B, but I'll look into that.
I don't think so.
Transportation funding is shrinking.
Yeah, Prop 42 was like
TCRP was a special appropriation by the governor and by the legislature.
But when that was built pretty recent here, the southern part, right? So it wasn't from 97 money that they were saving.
I don't remember. Mitch would know, but it's more like 95, 90,
They were saving it from
20, 25 or 26 money.
The question is NCRA actively looking for funds to rehabilitate this section of line? And if not, it appears that's the holding block for freight. is for NCRA itself to be looking for those funds. So is the NCRA looking for those funds actively?
Not to my knowledge.
No, but once we come up with a community consensus on how we're going to move forward, then we can start.
Well said, well said. Question in the back there.
It seems to me the thing that's been missing from the discussion, both in the first couple sessions and now, is we've been talking about costs, but the benefits are really entirely different as far as rails and trails. The benefit to a rail is huge for our community. I think it saves our community, it makes it economically viable and more powerful, and less, you know, to people like Charles Hurwitz and other people might come and take us over and try to make us a colony again, that kind of thing. But the benefits are huge. The benefits to having a trail system is great, but it's not in the same scale as the benefits for having a rail system that really works here and is a benefit to our children and our future in the big time. As I understand it, we're still trucking all our stuff up here. When I moved up here in the beginning in the 70s, it was like 15% more for food here, which is probably still in that same sort of range. And that was all because of the trucking costs. It's 3 times more efficient to transport something by rail, and that's only just by the cost of moving, not the cost of building cars for individual automobiles. So it's really more like 6 times more efficient to transport stuff by rail, which would seem to me make grants much more possible. And that we're now thinking about this as a nation. We have to change our way of doing things for energy self-sufficiency and things like that.
Let's focus more on questions instead of statements of opinion. So,
And let's do this, since we've got about 4 other groups that want to get on their feet here, make a presentation. Let's hold to our notion of these meetings going, you know, 2.5 hours, something like that, and so we don't get too hungry. And John, can you stick around for another hour or so?
Yes.
And be available to jump in as needed. And well, Mr. Chairman,
take it away. Let's. THA.
Oh yeah, Timber Harvest. Herald. I'm sorry. I spent years reviewing timber harvest plans. Pete Johnston, right?
Yeah. John, you want to speak?
Yeah.
Do you have a PowerPoint? Do you have a PowerPoint? Yeah, I have a carpenter's PowerPoint. Good morning, Pete Johnston, President of Timber Heritage Association. I've been a member of the organization since 2000 and an active volunteer since 2007 or so when they acquired the Samoa shops out in Jack's realm. The great shops built in 1893 by John Vance, and I'm a huge fan of local history and a carpenter, and when they put out the call for somebody to help with getting roofs on these historic structures so they don't melt into the ground, I stepped up and it's kind of my home away from home out there. So I'm a big fan of local history and preservation and sharing our local history. I'm just fascinated with the timber industry, and it's always been a passion of mine. And as I was working on the Samoa shops buildings out there, another part of the Timber Heritage volunteer contingent was working on this silly little speeder car. And they said, we're going to run this thing on the tracks. I ignored them totally. I didn't know what it was about. I don't have a rail background. Anyway, it became abundantly clear the first season of them running the speeder car. I think you're all familiar with our speeder cars, which were used to transport workers out to the woods back in the day. And it really opened my eyes to the popularity of rail and what an excursion train could bring. The previous president of Timber Heritage, Marcus Brown, who many of you know, was very rail-centered and had quite a rail background. And it took me a while to realize I was looking small at preserving and sharing our local history, but as I learned more about what an excursion train could bring to the area, excursion trains themselves, if you look at other excursion trains, they make a little bit of money. You know, they can sustain themselves and make a little bit of money. But when you look at what it brings to the area, what the skunk train and the Napa Valley wine train bring to those areas, and I understand we have figures of 1.5 million tourists pass through our area yearly. That's a huge number. And you know, what are they stopping here for? What are they doing while we're here? Can we capture some of those people to you know, to stay for an extra day, to enjoy our area and what we have to offer? And so Timber Heritage Association, our focus is bringing together not only we'd like to bring together a world-class museum out there at these Samoa shops. They are chock full of all kinds of timber heritage articles, which fascinate a lot of people. But we'd like to, we'd also like to build a museum that's more all-encompassing, the whole redwood heritage museum. We have the Draw of the Redwoods, the National Geographic cover. I mean, people are drawn to the redwoods. It's a gorgeous area we live in, and if we can give them another activity, a museum complex, an excursion train to get them to stay an extra day. There's people in this room and in the Timber Heritage organization who know a lot more about it than I, but the family of 4 that stays an extra day and how much they spend on gas, fuel, lodging. My wife and I and 2 kids, we travel a fair amount, and we just came back from a trip through the Northwest, a 2-week trip, and we stopped in some of these little towns on the Oregon coast, up in Tillamook, where they had an excursion train, and they had the cheese factory, and they had an air museum. Some of these things that, man, let's stay. We have time. Let's stay here a day. We stayed in a motel, bought food, gas, trinkets, the T-shirts, the works, and it just like, wow, we just lived it. Everything we're talking about at Timber Heritage. So, so our goal is to have an excursion train. I know there's been studies done, lots of studies. The 2003 study done by the city of Eureka was fairly complete, and there's things that we agree with, Timber Heritage agrees with, things that we think could be done differently to make it self-sustaining. And as far as how close we are as an organization to pulling off an excursion train, we have a diesel locomotive stored over at the flakeboard plant in Arcata, stored inside. It's a historic 1950, little as locomotives are concerned. It's a 44-ton diesel locomotive, could certainly be run on biodiesel. It's in running condition, needs a coat of paint, and because of the flakeboard plant being torn down around it, we're currently have plans to move that out to Samoa. We have a spot for it. So our diesel locomotive needs a coat of paint and FRA inspection. I don't know enough about what an FRA inspection involves for a piece of equipment like that. We also have out at Samoa at least 6 passenger cars. Some of them are close enough that all they need is a coat of paint and FRA inspection. I guess I can pass this around. Kind of the star of our fleet out there. Some of these pictures. There was an elderly couple in Santa Rosa, Howard and Cindy Vale, who were it was their lifelong dream to have their own excursion train, and ailing health and some other issues. Kind of the rug got pulled out from under them. They looked around the Northwest for a viable organization to donate these cars to. So they donated these, let's see, I guess 5, 4 we have in our possession. And some of these are just extremely gorgeous. The dining car, parlor car, and business car. Inlaid mahogany, chandeliers, gorgeous pieces of equipment that would definitely be the highlight of our excursion training. Why don't I pass that? This is my piece of cabinet left over, and my wife printing pictures at 6:30 this morning. So apologize for that. But we really feel like we would have something special. The Humboldt Bay Scenic Railroad, the Humboldt Bay Wine Train, the Humboldt Bay Beer Train. Our selection of breweries up here is astounding. Everybody in the room who's a beer drinker knows we live in a good area for that. And that's another thing that could be tied in to collaborate. So our equipment is this close to being ready, and I would say as soon as NCRA makes the tracks available to us. I know the first presentation of this meeting was kind of clarified what it would take for for the tracks to be brought up to Class 1, Class A. I forget the terminology. Standards for our excursion train to run, but that was kind of heartening for us to know that these things are being looked at and looked at a little closer. So wanted to keep it brief. Any questions?
I appreciate that, Pete. And the reference to Dave Anderson's presentation, the first of the 3 listening sessions that we've had here, which was on the 28th of September, Dave kind of mumbled what he thought the restoration costs would be. Said he had to get with John Williams, among others, find out what kind of service he's talking about. And Hank Seaman has that draft report under review as we speak and is wrapping it up, what, today, Tom? Or so
in the next week or so.
Pardon me?
Within the next week or so.
Yeah. So the reports by Dave Anderson and by Merritt Perry, who you recall presented on the 12th, are under review, and those will be posted. Who's going to post them? NCRA, I guess.
We'll be posting when they're final for us.
On the county public works webpage. Okay. Be able to go in there and see those numbers. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Pete, because I wanted to make clear we don't have those final numbers, but they will be available soon.
Just kind of as a baseline of what you're doing currently, you're running these little speeders. It looks like maybe you get 25 or 30 people per trip. You're operating how many days a year and how many passengers per year?
Right, good question. I believe we had 6 of our little speeder rides, some of them out at Samoa, which kind of coincide with the Samoa shops. We ran down in Lolita twice, which was extremely popular, from downtown Lolita to the tunnel. It was a great collaboration with the Lolita Chamber of Commerce. They paid to have the tracks cleared, and we were the biggest thing to hit Lolita in 15 years. That particular day in Lolita, we gave upwards of 600 people rides from downtown Lolita up to the tunnel. Click, take a picture, take them back, load up another 24 people. So over the course of a year, we've given 2,500 to 3,000 riders on the 5 or 6 Saturdays, all volunteers. We have a great volunteer contingent with Timber Heritage. We currently have about 365 members, and volunteers are clamoring to help us. There's a lot of excitement. Something I hit on was some of the costs involved with the rail restoration was all the crossings. If we wanted to get up into Arcata, the Arcata Y, and do some of those crossings, I don't know if the possibility exists of flaggers, volunteers flagging some of those intersections and not having to
have signals.
I don't know if that's an option, or where the 255 crossing at Samoa would probably have to be a full-on, spend as much as we can on it. kind of deal, but some of the other minor crossings possibly could be flagged, and we would have volunteers. It's amazing, these guys who all stand there for a day to watch, you know. Anyway, that's a fun thing to be involved in, a lot of energy in our organization. We've made some great strides here the last couple of years.
Underwriting support for this program is brought to you by the City of Eureka, the Victorian Seaport. Visit their website at ci.eureka.ca.gov.
Thanks very much. Oh, Dennis has a question.
Pete, it sounds like I mean, you guys have done an amazing amount with the resources you have, and that you have both locomotives and passenger trains ready to go. But then it all comes back to getting the tracks and getting those operational so that you can go ahead and run the equipment that you have. Have you or the Timber Heritage Association been able to identify any funding to look into? Because that's what I keep hearing. I hear both from John Williams, I hear from NCRA. It all comes down to funds. So has THA been able to identify, because we're talking, you know, all depends on what you want to go, you know, potentially $18 to $30 million from Samoa to Eureka.
Right.
Any
Timber, I know the conversation has come up at our board of directors meetings.
Sure.
But I think that's an NCRA question. Pete Oranger, board member. I don't know if you would have anything to add to that.
You know, the fact that THA is ready to go, and we would be under the auspices of the operator of the railroad, and they, in conjunction, predicate their operation to NCRA, who owns the right-of-way. So those are questions that we can't deal with here. We're just waiting to get the go-ahead that we can start, and we're ready to start. We, you know, as you've indicated, and I kind of wear two hats in this conversation. I've been a board member with THA since about 1999, 2000, and been on the board of, elected to the board of directors of Humboldt County Visitor and Tourist Center for over a decade. So we're challenged in this area by destination marketing, and I'm not talking about Disneyland marketing. I'm talking about our assets, which are the trees and the Victorians and appreciation of the bay and all the things that I'm sure you appreciate, and I certainly do. And we know that those tourists currently at about $1.5 million level is more than double than when tourist rail service was available a decade and a half ago. It was in the neighborhood of 400,000 or 500,000, and it's $1.5 million now. And we know that the estimated expenditures are about $300 million now for the people. So the benefits are big if we can get that average party of 3.8 to stay here an extra day and spend some money. And you can put whatever figure you want on it. We know that it's about $200 to $300 that they spend a day, and the multiplier effect is 2.7. It was what our consultants gave as that. But these are fluid numbers, and we can just, you know, we listen to them, and what they are, they are. So this is one piece of the puzzle. THA and rail service and all the other good things we're hearing to as part of our economic generator. In addition to trails, which certainly qualify in quality of life and certainly have a factor in facilitating keeping these people here another day. So all this is part of the message that I think I see here, and that would be my contribution.
Great, thanks, Pete.
Can I ask one more question? I'll be brief. It's really related to the 2003 feasibility study, which you alluded to, Pete, and that I know that seems to say that you can't support tourist train without freight. So in the absence of freight, is there a way that you could see the annual maintenance cost of the track being supported by tourist train alone?
Over my head. I don't know if that's it, yeah. Yeah, good question.
I don't think you can. I don't think you can. It's the cost of the infrastructure and the maintenance and the expertise you have to bring to bear on it. And yeah, the bigger the market is, the more riders you have, the more money you have, the better is your chance of getting there. But so far from what I've seen in the market, you can't do it.
Do you have an opinion if the cost of the rehabilitation could be paid for entirely with, let's say, public funds, and there were no debt service once you had it up and running? Could the excursion operation support the ongoing operation and maintenance?
I think then, with the size market Pete's been talking about, I think then you could. It would be close, but I think then possibly you could. Yes, sir.
Thank you. And thank you, Pete. And so I think now we're going to go to the CalTrans presentation, and Kim Floyd,
you're up.
one more question. Okay, so Kim Floyd, please.
Okay.
And we're very happy to have had strong CalTrans participation in these meetings. They haven't presented, but they've been here in force as they are today. So I don't know if you want to introduce any of your partners also.
Sure, I will. I'm Kim Floyd. I think I know most people here. I'm a project manager at CalTrans. I've also got Todd Lark, who's project engineer that I work with on the corridor, as well as, I'm looking around, Charlie Fielder, our district director, is here. And I think we've got a couple of folks from planning. Tasha, is Rex here? I thought, and Rex from planning. So I'll be brief. I know the focus of these three meetings was really the rail infrastructure, and I was asked to kind of give an update on CalTrans and funding, and I'll do that. That is, our 101 corridor is the other big piece of infrastructure out there, and we currently have two projects we've been working on out in that corridor. One of them is actually a pavement overlay that was just awarded this week to Mercer Fraser for $14 million. So that's a preservation component of the pavement out there, and I expect that would get started probably, weather permitting, probably next spring. And then the other piece that we have working with HCOG, and Marcella Clem is here today as well, is the what's known as the 101 Corridor Improvement Project. And that project has been in the works since 1999, and that was a project that HCOG, as our local partner, asked CalTrans to look at finding a way to improve the safety and operations of the at-grade intersections out there. It kind of became known as the Corridor Improvement Project. We also, at one time, had a major rehabilitation project with bridge work and tidegate work and a lot of other work in it that was downscoped to what I just talked about, which is the pavement overlay to address the pavement conditions out there. But really the focus of the corridor project that we're working on with HCOG has been to deal with those at-grade intersections. That's the problem out in the corridor, and so in 2001, we started the kickoff to that process, and as I think you guys have heard, you've learned about the challenges of working in that corridor. A lot of issues out there. We knew when we kicked off that project, we were looking at doing an EIS, environmental impact report, under SEQ1, an environmental impact statement under NEPA. We knew that that's somewhat of a lengthy process, and due to public pressure because of the safety situation that we had in the corridor, we, along with a lot of other local law enforcement and local agencies and cities, got together and worked out the solution of the safety corridor, the interim solution, and that was kicked off in 2002. And just to give you an update, our Office of Traffic Safety recently released I think it was their 10-year report on that, and essentially the conclusion is we still have safety issues at Mid-City and Mineola. Those locations are still above statewide average. We still have that need to look at those intersections and make improvement. So where we've gone with the project has been a lot of steps. We released our draft EIS in 2007, so 5 years ago. Got a lot of comments on it. It's 300 to 400 comments, a lot of different interests, interest in trails, interest in business access, interest in many different things out there. And so based on those comments and working with our partners at the counties and cities, we modified those build alternatives and took that back out to the public for additional comments in 2008. So in 2010, working with our agencies, federal agencies, we got our LEDPA, which is what is they buy off on the least environmental damaging practicable alternative out there. And that was what you may be familiar with that we're proposing to do, and that is to build a grade separation at Indianola, a half signal at Airport, and close the remaining median openings. You'd still be able to make the right-on and right-offs, but there'd be no left turns. So as we work towards finalizing the environmental document for that, one of the things that we need to obtain, and the point we're at right now, is our federal coastal consistency. That was something that FHWA, again our partner in this, said that we really wanted the consistency determination in advance of the final environmental document. And you may have heard Bob Merrill when he was here, I think a couple of weeks ago, talk about their goal of completing the coastal trail and some of their concerns with any work proposed in the corridor. So we are continuing to work with Coastal Commission at this point, and hopefully we'll continue to move forward and get the project out in construction. We were able to, again with HCOG, our funding partner, secure, and this just tells you about our funding situation, which I'll go into a little bit more because I know that's one of the things that people wanted to hear about. Funding is also very tight for us. I know NCRA has financial issues. Well, we do too. We've got 4 counties and a lot of needs here that CalTrans District 1 works on. So we did get to fund $14.5 million for phase 1 of our project. That would be in the 15-16 fiscal year, so available in 2015-16. And we simply weren't able to find a way to fund the whole project at once. And that's where we came up with the idea of phasing it. So we would build the northbound portion of the interchange and the half signal, and then we'd wait for additional funding to complete the southbound section. And we, being CalTrans, continue to work through our avenues to secure that funding as well. So let me real briefly also talk about funding. In my world where I work in delivering projects, we really have 2 opportunities to fund projects. And one of those is through our SHOP program, the State Highway Operation Protection Program. And that's really funding that's set up just to deal with the existing infrastructure. Like I said, dealing with the pavement out there. That $14 million comes from our SHOP program to preserve the state's investment in that infrastructure. You know, if we get new bridges, they're generally bridge replacements, those sorts of things. We don't get new infrastructure projects generally in the SHOP. Our #1 priority in the SHOP is safety and storm damage. Everything else kind of comes after that, funding available. The second pot that we look to for funding is what's known as the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program, and that's where you see the projects like Willits Bypass. That's being funded out of the STIP. Alton Interchange was funded by HCOG and completed out of the STIP. Like I said, there are partners. They're the funding component to the Eureka Arcata Corridor Improvement Project. And that's kind of broken up into 2 parts. 25% CalTrans controls, known as the IP, and then the RTIP is the 75% of the funding that goes to, in this case, in our county, HCOG. And then we also have our minor program, which is our director's discretionary program. Minor A's are projects under $1 million. Minor B's, I think, are $250,000 and under. And I think generally in a given year, we get maybe $2 million worth of minor A projects. It's not very, very much. So that's where we go to for our funding. And then also in the planning world, I know that you guys work with the Transportation Enhancement Program. And Rex would be the person that could talk more about that. But really, I've been very interested. I've been at all of these meetings, and I think this has been great because one of the things that we've heard throughout the years is, what about NCRA? I'm going to get that all the time. What's going to happen with the railroad out there? And of course, you know, I'm dealing with the highway, not the railroad, but one of the things that has come up quite a bit is a trail, a Class 1 facility. I know the city of Arcata's working on some things. Like I said, it is something the Coastal Commission is looking to, through legislation, I believe, to complete the coastal trail. We have the Coastal Conservancy that's looking for that as well. So, you know, if there's a few minor questions, I'd be happy to see what I can do to answer those. But I think for my part, if I can just say, I'm really hopeful that maybe with this we can still see some more discussion on some of these components. Especially, I was really interested in what Merritt did last week on the trail component, and I'd love to see further discussion and maybe hopefully even some collaboration in the future on that. And Charlie, if there was any, I just didn't want to, I wanted to see if Charlie had anything to add.
Could I take a quick shot at you on this? kind of a question. I kind of, because somebody put me on a what is it, a National Rail Conservancy list, and things pop up on my computer all the time. I know there's been a struggle in Congress over the transportation enhancement funds. Is that settled? Is that secure? Or as secure as you get?
It is not settled. It is not secure. There's money there, but there's an issue statewide of how it's going to be allocated in the state of California, and it's a major issue.
So it's a bigger Sacramento than Washington, D.C.
Washington's done with it. They said, we're putting the money in this pot of money. States figure out how to spend it.
Okay, because that transportation enhancement seemed like it was prime for helping in trail development.
Very prime.
Right.
But the way it's going right now, it's going to be trail development in Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Mm.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll get John
That's
Willie's
just
here.
my
We'll
opinion,
get
but-
cracking on that.
Kim?
Yeah.
How about the 255 project? Can you shed any light on that or an update on that?
Oh, you mean the feasibility?
Feasibility study, yeah.
Project. I don't really have any update. I think that they're still working. They had a second public meeting, Charlie. I didn't attend, but they're looking at maybe Rex, traffic calming, and also...
Yeah, the feasibility study is imminent. I'm not sure of the exact release date, but it's in final review.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
And
Final
it has a series of recommendations, you know, from things that are already being implemented all the way through more complex and more expensive solutions to get people across basically the entire route of 255.
And
What is the-
did Mr. Fielder, did you have anything to add at this point?
No, I think Kim gave a nice overview of the work that we're doing within that corridor. Maybe one thing I want to go ahead and add is the funds that were used to go ahead and help get NCRA back in business, from my recollection, were from the TCRP program, which was a proposition that was developed back in, I believe, the 90s. That was different economic times than what we're under right now, and so it's going to be real difficult in finding that same type of support through a program like that. I do know that there was, and we all agree, a lot of this comes down to funding. When you have the money and you have the, you know, the business interest, you can make a lot of things happen. And so I think it takes a lot of creativity and coordination to be able to make some of these dreams become a reality. I kind of give credit to the city of Arcata for how much they've accomplished already in just getting some of the grant funding to develop that northern part of the trail network, which is what a lot of people are here that are interested in, and doing it and still preserving the rail line out there. There could be some future federal legislation. Right now, they just finished the what they call the MAP 21, and there is some funding in there for trail as well as for freight service, but the funding is at the current level that our federal legislation for transportation was at. But 2 years from now, when it has to be reauthorized again, there could be some opportunities if the economy improves in that.
And also if the White House and Congress can get along together, because transportation funding bills are typically 5-year programs, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And they're bipartisan supported too. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate that there was a lot of disagreements in how to get that implemented, which is why they did it in a 2-year bill.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I have a question that I've continually heard that with the safety corridor to actually get signed off from the Coastal Commission, they want some sort of multimodal or trail component of that. And that's been a holdup in some of it. So have you, as CalTrans, had any direct talks with either NCRA and or with John Williams over this whole possibility? Because it seems like here's these two parties everybody keeps talking about. You said everybody goes to you and asks about NCRA, but you have the folks here. It seems like, is there a reason that those conversations haven't happened, or?
Well, they're certainly happening between CalTrans and the Coastal Commission.
Yeah, but I'm talking about between CalTrans and both PECO and with NCRA, because like you said, it keeps going back here, and it seems like that discussion keeps going around and around. That's a real component, along with obviously funding here. So.
Yeah, I continue to work with commission staff. We are meeting with them in the next couple of weeks, and you're absolutely right. That's one of the things that they are asking about. How about in the back here?
What's the timeline on the federal consistency determination at this point?
Well, basically last spring we submitted for our consistency determination, and after talking, and that's done through the San Francisco office of the commission along with coordination with the local staff here, we went ahead and withdrew that application in hopes of working with the staff, and I think our plan is within the next 6 months to be before the commission for that determination.
So not in December then?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my question is that right now the rail prism serves as a de facto dike between the bay and 101 corridor, and it seems to me that as that continues to deteriorate, it creates a real issue for the 101 corridor. What happens if there's nothing done to rebuild the dike?
I talked with our maintenance and hydraulic staff, and there is concern about the culverts, the existing culverts, but they're not overall concerned with that at this time. So I guess we'll do it.
Well, along those same lines, it seems to me that there's an opportunity for these public agencies to get together and solve a problem that we all see. And the problem is that the prism is deteriorating. Regardless of what your hydraulic people would say to you, it's pretty apparent to most of us that within the time frames of the decisions that we're talking about making here, which is tens of years, there's going to be a real threat to the corridor. It'll be underwater in another 20, I would guess. So isn't there a solution here for CalTrans and other public agencies to get together and fix the prism and put a bike trail on it?
I'll defer to you on that one.
Maybe that's a question for Charlie, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to a good answer.
I agree. I mean, just by watching what's been going on here for several years now, it looks like there is a real opportunity for government to be coordinating with each other. The way we're set up is we have different right-of-ways and responsibilities that we have jurisdiction over, and our jurisdiction for the state is within the state highways right-of-way. We don't have the authority to go off on other people's property and do what we think is fit. Sometimes we can make a case in doing that through an eminent domain process, but it can be challenged in at the CTC or in court. And as you know, litigation is also an option there. I see this as a great opportunity where there could be a lot of win-win. The Army Corps of Engineers used to be involved in these sort of things, but as far as building levees and protection around communities, you don't really see that these days. And so being here on the North Coast, what we've been accustomed to doing during times of emergencies is banding together and coming up with a common solution. Sometimes it's done rather quickly and under an emergency order. I'd hate to see something like that happen in this case here, when we have enough advanced time to be able to work together cooperatively and come up with a solution. The highway is not really at risk at this time, but looking into the future, and that one storm surge that we had a few winters ago where we did have a closure on the southbound lanes of 101 with some debris that was thrown up on the shoreline there. That's probably the biggest risk that we're seeing right now, being able to maintain and keep the facility open for the travelers. But we have communities, we have wastewater treatment plants, we have a lot of infrastructure all around the bay that's going to be at risk of what I assume you were referring to is the potential for sea level rise. And accompany that with high tides and storms, you can get some pretty spectacular events. So I do see some opportunities on that. Once again, a lot of it comes down to funding and being able to make sure that we have, political and financial support to do, a comprehensive plan. But getting to a consensus in what we're doing, and this exercise that's going through here right now could help lead that off to some of the other things that are going to have to be done around the bay to where we can actually have a real solution to what's kind of a global problem.
Go ahead. I was wondering if you could speak to what the repaving project entails and what will be different?
Sure. Primarily it's just placing an asphalt overlay over the existing pavement. We're not extending the pavement. We had a traffic ops initiated. It was a commitment we made through the rehabilitation, a restriping project, if you will, that we combined with the CAP-M, and that is simply when we replace the striping lanes, we're going to take a foot from the inside shoulder and the #1 lane out there and provide it to the outside shoulder, so we'll have a striped 10-foot outside shoulder. And we're also going to pave in the actual paving process, kind of a brick-colored shoulder out there. The outside shoulder will have a colorization to it. So other than that, it'll be essentially the same with new asphalt.
And then a wider.
And that's from the Slough Bridge. I think we go to 14th. Todd, is it to 14th Street in Arcata?
No. Yeah, the widened shoulder will go all the way to the 255 interchange.
And the overlay goes a little.
The overlay goes all the
yeah.
way to the Arcata overhead north of Sunset.
And you're also going to have a wider white edge stripe separating the shoulder from the traffic lanes with a rumble strip in there as well.
Right, we'll replace the rumble strips. Yes.
First of all, in the first meeting, it was pointed out that this is not a dike. That's just a rail bed. There's no dike there at all. So it doesn't really protect the freeway from anything. It never was intended to. But that aside, when you've considered pedestrian traffic, have you ever considered a trail that runs along the east side of the freeway?
We've never really done.
There's a huge amount of
Well,
room.
actually, maybe Rex, you're in plant. Our project has been looking at the intersection, so we haven't been studying trails, but maybe Rex has.
And I think a lot of the people in the room were involved in the study that took place in, was it 2007?
Yeah.
That was focused on the Arcata Eureka corridor and pedestrian, bicycle, the possibility of developing a trail. And initially we all looked at both the east and west side, and for a number of reasons, including the number of both property owners and water crossings and structures that would be required. The focus of that study ended up being on the west side. So there hasn't been a comprehensive feasibility focusing on the east side.
Well, it sure looks logical that at least on at least all the way to Indianola. There's a huge amount of space there, and it's all on CalTrans' property, and it's below the grade of the road, so the bicyclists wouldn't have wind to contend with. It seems like it at least should be considered. I know it's not the preview of this group because we're talking about a rail trail, but it seems like CalTrans should be looking at something like that.
Underwriting support for this program is brought to you by the City of Eureka, the Victorian Seaport. Visit their website at ci.eureka.ca.gov.
Mr. Chairman, shall we move along? We've got a couple more folks that want to
Sure.
present.
So we'd like to give East West an opportunity to make a brief presentation.
All right.
And we'll follow that with a trail.
Dan? Try to get this up and running here.
Alright, I'm Nick Angeloff. I'm here on behalf of the East West Rail Advocate Group. Former lead of Prosperity 2012 East West Rail as well. I'll make this quick and sweet. Basically, this presentation was designed for this, thanks to David Holt. Most of it is boilerplated off of his. What is the alternative rail route? Simply an alternative to an existing north-south line. The new rail line extending from Humboldt Bay's harbor east to a connection with the national rail network in the Sacramento Valley. Not a new idea. Jess Lentell in 1909 surveyed the route. Basically, there was a competition between the north-south route and the east-west route. The north-south route ended up winning out because San Francisco earthquake in 1906, lumber demand created a need for a north-south route, is my understanding of it. The eastern route has a long history and is potentially half the length and has less tunnels and bridges than the existing route. There's several options, not just Lentell's. The whole idea of a feasibility study would be to determine a route. These are just conceptual ideas to get some lines on the map, give people an idea of what may happen. When did this effort start? In 2011, now EWRA brought the alternative rail route concept to connect Humboldt Bay's harbor to the national rail network into the spotlight. In January of 2012, the City of Eureka took action to lead an effort to inform other governmental agencies of the concept. Who supports the feasibility study? In less than 10 months, EWRA and the City of Eureka have garnered support from 33 government agencies, labor, business, education, law enforcement, citizens group, representing a vast geographic region of Northern California. Local government, we have Eureka, Fortuna, Riadel, Humboldt, Tehama, Trinity, Wiyot Tribe, and Northern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, which represents, I believe, 13 tribes. Feasibility study support for the federal government, Six Rivers National Forest, and Shasta Trinity National Forest. The law enforcement, the Sheriff's Office, Eureka Police Officers Association, Deputy Sheriff's Organization. Education, Humboldt State University, Humboldt County Office of Education. Labor, all sorts of labor is supporting us, including Building and Construction Trades Department of the American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial CIO, AFL-CIO national level. Then we have state labor, local labor, longshoremen, building and construction trades of Humboldt and Del Norte, and again, bricklayers and allied craft workers of California. Local and regional business interests, upstate California, California Association for Local Economic Development, Eureka Chamber, Humboldt Redwood Company, the Realtors, Western Pacific Railroad, Union Pacific Railroad, California Marine and Intermodal Transportation Advisory Committee. Other supporters, us, Land Bridge Alliance, Rail and Port Infrastructure Transportation Committee, and the Humboldt Bay Harbor Working Group. And as I understand it, not that they're lending support, but as of last night, the Harbor Commission formed a committee to take a position on not just east-west, but rail in general, as it integrates with them. Recent developments, the Upstate Rail Connect Committee formed in October, on October 16, 2012, through MOA between Eureka, County of Humboldt, Trinity, Tehama, Upstate California Economic Development Council. Their first meeting will be in November of 2012, coming up here. The potential scope of work, identification of proposed routes, alternatives, identification of ownerships, assessment of market potential, conceptual route development plan that will include ownership, engineering, preliminary, highway port connectors, additional uses of the corridor, fiber optic trail, etc. Estimated permitting needs, estimated environmental issues and mitigations, and estimated development costs and timelines. Why an alternative rail concept now? Economically, it's a boom. Maxing out the port at 10 times its current level of activity, it creates a potential for 3,000 new jobs, 90 million new wage payments, and 400 million increase in gross regional product annually. Now, even if these numbers, the port isn't fully utilized, half that is a significant increase in our economy now. Then I added some slides on environment. Oh, that really stinks. There we go. Basically, this is how greenhouse gases are contributing by transportation forms. This is trucking. This is rail. It's about 2% worldwide. American Association of Railroads. The railroad fuel efficiency has increased by 71.9% since 1980. And that's from Railroad Facts in 2001. This is from Environment Canada in Ottawa in 2004, the table. And you're ranking the greenhouse gases by freight transportation. Most desirable is rail, as far as contributions to the, and this is what we're doing right now. So, worldwide greenhouse gas emissions, freight and environment, there's the address I got it from. You look at rail transport relative to the rest of the transportation methods, and you can't even see the line on the bar graph. It's a highly efficient, environmentally friendly form of transportation. And then we go back to, I have no idea what it's But effectively, there was, those two last slides are the fuel efficiency of rail versus truck, and per ton mile, which is a ton of freight moved a mile, rail ranges from about 156 miles per ton per gallon of fuel to about 500, and truck ranges from somewhere around 30 to 136.
And I agree with you, but you know, the PowerPoint concept is breaking down a little, so
yes,
if you have a little more that you could move through, or was that it?
I can call it there, and basically what I wanted to say at the end was, you know, we can, with this group here, with the people in this room, we can work together to make this happen, and we can think into the future here. This is going to be the transportation mode of the future, and if we focus on getting things up and running now, we can contribute to a worldwide healthy environment, and we can contribute to a healthy economy in this area. 1 in 4 children in this area live in poverty.
And
This can help.
The question I'd like to ask, and it's pretty obvious to me, that anything that we are able to do to restore rail service around the bay obviously will be complementary to your plans.
Correct.
So therefore, whether east-west ultimately proves to be feasible or not, I would imagine you're completely supportive of anything that the community can do to get rail going around the bay.
Absolutely, and that's the concept in the end, is any collaboration we can make, and I'll facilitate, and I've already offered at the NCRA meetings. Anything I can do to collaborate, I'm a grant writer, to write grants, I am offering up once again. We need to restore rail service to this area. We need to make our systems more efficient. And we need to look at the feasibility of east-west rail to enhance our local short line. This is what we're asking for, is a feasibility study, and nothing more at this time. We want to know if it's viable.
Thank you. And so I'll get some more questions here.
It sounds like everybody's coming down to funding. I mean, that's what John's saying, that's what NCRA is saying, and from what I'm hearing from you is similar, that you're trying to get this feasibility study. How close are we to getting private money for this feasibility study?
We're working on it. There's no timeline now. We formed the committee. That's a significant step towards getting financing for this, whether it's private or public. There's interest in it. It's showing the coordinated effort between the groups and the public support for a feasibility study is what we need. And I think by a collaboration and by what's happening in this room, that can happen in short order.
We got two more over here that were up first.
Yes.
We did receive, the city received a CDBG planning and technical to help find those funds.
Yes.
What do you think a feasibility study would cost?
That ranges, and that's one of the things that the committee will assess.
And we'll give me a ballpark.
Well, let's not get too sidetracked on that. Don's got a question here.
Yes, sir.
I know it's build it and they will come. You know, to me, the east-west link is kind of like the tail of the dog. What is the infrastructure outlook for the port? What are we going to be importing or exporting through Humboldt Bay? And who is going to finance that infrastructure?
That's part of the feasibility study as well. What markets are out there? What potential? What's the viability? The market will determine the viability, the feasibility of the project. We'll define a cost, and we'll define what it would take to make that project viable. And that's why we want to do a feasibility study. You know, there's all sorts of options out there, but I can't comment on it. I don't know. So, yes, sir.
The size of the load that would come in and out of Humboldt Bay would be significant enough that it would have to change the existing railroad infrastructure that exists around the bay in terms of the rail prism, the quality of the rails, the ties, everything. I'm assuming the load is not going to be sort of at a class 1 level.
I can't make that assumption again. You know, this is what we're after. We're after answering these questions you guys have, that we have as well.
Mr. Williams might be able to answer that question.
I think, depending on the volume, I think you shoot for class 3. Did you get rid of these?
Yes, I did.
Okay. You really have big volume on the east coast.
And keep in mind, this is the concept is to be a through port. There's not enough import business here to make anything truly marketable. There's not enough population. The idea is to get goods from our port to better utilize our port to get goods to the center of the United States, to connect to the national rail system.
So it's likely a container port. Likely a container port?
I don't know. That's again, that's a viability. The containers are interesting. Break bulk's interesting. Agricultural products interesting as well. So who knows?
Will be a land bridge.
That's the idea here. It's to be a land bridge, minimize impacts in this region, and maximize profits in this region. And the more that's going into the port, the more money flowing through that harbor district, in my mind, the more the environmental projects can be funded without relying on grants.
So thank you, and I think now we will move to the Bay Trail presentation.
They're circulating. I can offer.
Now I really speak on behalf of the Bay Trail advocates. We really have been the gadflies that have pushed this process along. This conversation that the NCRA has been having about the condition and use of the right-of-way and rail prism between
What's your name?
Reese between Eureka and Samoa is important to all of us in the community. From the beginning, the Bay Trail advocates have looked for reasoned compromises in the hopes of achieving a win-win solution, but our highest priority is still unchanged. It's to develop a trail for bikes and pedestrians between Eureka and Arcata. Why? Because we need and we want a trail to connect our two largest population centers for transportation and recreational purposes. And the NCRA, a public agency, happens to own and control the least expensive and most logical right-of-way where the trail can be built. A right-of-way the public owns already that sits unused. But we knew some things before these meetings started. First, that a train has not run on any tracks in the county for 15 years. That aside from THA's sweat equity, little or no maintenance has been done for many years on the right-of-way. That this public right-of-way remains an unused and deteriorating asset. We learned from the NCRA engineer Dave Anderson that every culvert needs to be replaced. All bridges and crossings need work. The prism is literally melting into the bay in spots. We learned from Mr. Anderson it would take somewhere roughly $10 to $30 million, I guess I don't know for sure, to reopen the line for a train to go at the most basic 10 mile per hour Class 1 level. And we know that the NCRA has no money to make these repairs. Those are the facts. We were discouraged by the price tag of a rail with trail solution for the Eureka-Arcata right-of-way. Merritt Perry's estimate of nearly $18 million seems a high price to pay in order to maintain railroad infrastructure in which no freight train is destined to run for many years. The 2007 Bay Trail feasibility study estimated the cost of rail to trail for that stretch to be less than $5 million. It means that preserving the tracks for a someday train has a cost of some $13 million. Mr. Perry's presentation did suggest a lower cost compromise that we liked. Save money by preserving the tracks where fiscally prudent, but borrowing the right-of-way where rail with trail is very high cost, such as the Eureka Slough Bridge, stretches along where wetlands are on both sides of the rail prism. Today we learned that the operator's plans are to continue to concentrate, understandably, on the south end of the line, and that he has no plans for return of freight service in the north, and understandably, again, cannot give us a time frame when that might occur. This conversation has gone on a long time. It's true that the NCRA mandate is for rail service, but there is no rail service, and any return of service could easily be 15 or 20 or more years out. Therefore, using the right-of-way in the interim until rail service returns for bikes and pedestrians just makes sense. Now these, as everybody has said, are very tough financial times. Our cities and county have very limited resources. The NCRA is broke. We have to be creative. We're asking you to do the most financially responsible thing, looking at all the needs of our community, to allow us to use the right-of-way for a trail between Eureka and Arcata, and to support us in any way you can to help us reopen the tracks between Arcata and Samoa so that the THA can move forward with its plan for a museum linked to an operational tourist train. This is a compromise we think we can afford and we can support. And thank you for your long stretch of endurance through this whole process, and to the NCRA for considering these questions. So, Thank you.
Bill, go ahead.
Well, no, I was like, Mr. Chairman.
So, you know, I guess my initial reaction is that NCRA considered that basic proposal, and even with 3 board members not present, it was not able to garner a majority. I don't see that changing. If people want to advocate for rail only, if they want to advocate for trail only, that increases the odds we get nothing. That's my point of view. And I think that, again, if this community can come together and form a real consensus of here's how we might be able to construct a trail, here's how we might be able to restore the rail corridor, we might be able to get the excursion train running, there might be some local freight around the bay. CalTrans has an interest in trying to accommodate the wishes of the Coastal Commission. And so, you know, some of these things kind of work against each other also. In the sense that I was thinking as I was driving up today that with the current environmental laws, you could not build Highway 101. You couldn't build it between Eureka and Arcata. You know, we'd have to be getting on a barge or something, or a ferry boat to go from one town to the next. So it's very challenging with the environmental and the permitting environment that we have to operate in. But if we can get all these divergent interests who all have their particular interests, and we have the support of the City of Arcata, City of Eureka, County of Humboldt, Humboldt County Association of Governments, all these different players here, if we can develop a true community consensus, then you can actually get the support of your state and federal legislators, and that helps open some doors also. But if there's no community consensus, your state legislators and federal legislatures are not going to stick their neck out, you know. They'll just keep watching the fur fly. So again, my hope is, and I think that's been the position of Bill, and we'll hear from him in a minute, and also Cliff, that our hope is that we can help develop the community consensus. And these 3 meetings that we've had thus far has been the start of that conversation. And a lot of people have asking, well, what's NCRA doing and when are they going to do it? Well, we appreciate the push, but to kind of get us moving a little. But people need to understand that NCRA has a lot of troubles of its own. From its inception, it's been underfunded, and particularly with no rail service for 15 years. We've consistently operated on a budget where our cost is double what our income is. So do the math on that. NCRA has been surviving by a wing and a prayer. And then every time we attempt to do anything, there are 1 or more groups that would like to come forward and try and prevent us from doing it. So we've a lot of money that could be used just for the normal maintenance. Frankly, I'm embarrassed at times to say I'm on the NCRA board when I look at the lack of maintenance on the corridor. You know, the weeds and the brush and the transients and all the rest of it. You know, it's not something to be proud of when you see what the rail corridor looks like through our communities. And that's frankly one thing that first sparked my interest in NCRA, was serving on the Ukiah City Council and having an interest in what could we do to clean this up. So, you know, it's been very difficult with the lack of funding to even do the most basic level of maintenance. So then how do you go out and rebuild a rail line? It will rely on public money, and that will not materialize without concerted community support. So I'll throw it to Bill, and then I might have a few additional comments. Not as a rebuttal, but just I do want to kind of do a wrap-up when we get to that point.
I just wanted to ask, you said that there's not support from the state legislature, but my understanding is that West Chesbro wrote a letter asking NCRA to study rail banking, and I don't understand why this committee didn't study that.
We asked West Chesbro if he would undertake to open the doors so that there would be a possibility for NCRA to get a modest annual appropriation for basic maintenance and safety issues and things like that. And initially he, said he might, and then other people that were afraid that that could cut into transportation funding for them got his ear, and suddenly he had no more interest in that. So again, I think the way to get our legislators on board is if we truly have a consensus from the community. Bill?
I'm not sure you answered my question, but okay.
Well,
West did.
Yeah, he did send a letter in favor of rail banking, but that doesn't do anything for NCRA.
But why wasn't it studied by this committee? That's my real question. I don't understand why.
Well, NCRA has made a decision that, consistent with our foundational documents, our charge of what NCRA's responsibility is, we are more than willing to consider trails in conjunction with rail. But NCRA's mission is to operate a railroad.
You missed out, Jen. The Humboldt County Board of Supervisors took up the ask from the Bay Rail Trail advocates on the 26th of June and spent 3 hours. They were divided on, not necessarily on the rail banking ask, but on the details of that. On the 11th of July, but at the end of the day, the county supervisors found agreement. There were 4 there present. Jim Smith was missing in action that day. There were 4 there present that could sign off on a letter to NCRA asking NCRA to create a rail banking committee. Okay? Fast forward to the 11th of July, NCRA board, with 3 members missing, meets in Eureka and is split as evenly as was the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors, with 1 member saying, if it's got anything to do with rail banking, it's a non-starter as far as I'm concerned, okay? So it was John McCowen who, I think we went 5.5 hours on the agenda item. It was John McCowen who finally said, look, let's form a committee to figure out what to do with our property along the bay, okay? And that brought us to these 3 learning and listening sessions. Now what we have to do is get our hands on the final reports that are at work in Tom Matson's Public Works Department, and then I guess I've volunteered to start the drafting process of a report by our 3-member committee. John and Cliff will be in the loop from day 1, reviewing my drafting effort to get something not only before our North Coast Railroad Authority board meeting when it meets in Eureka on the 14th of November, but hopefully I can draft fast enough. Oh God, Bill Bertin left his hat.
He's not out there, Bill. He's still there.
Hey, Bill, we got a runner.
That would be huge. I hope to get something up on a website so that you all can look at it, so you understand, because you recall, Virginia, the conversation before your board on the 26th of June was that we were going to have like a 47-member committee, and I think it was John McCowen's cooler head that said that doesn't work. And besides, as he put it, at the end of the day, these are NCRA assets, and it's NCRA appointed directors that are going to have to decide what the heck to do with them. 49-member committee, and I think I felt very much like we were, 49-member committee. I think everybody's had a good shot at listening and asking and learning. So I think that the Board of Supervisors' purpose was met by this process. I hope it.
Can I just say one thing? I know there's a divergence of opinions on the NCRA about this, but I want to commend you guys for coming together and putting this together as well as you have, because I think all sides have been represented pretty well here, and we make a pretty good decision on the information we have. So I'd like to thank you guys.
Great. I guess.
Underwriting support for this program is brought to you by the City of Eureka, the Victorian Seaport. Visit their website at ci.eureka.ca.gov.
I wanted to read you a quick sentence and ask if you guys agree with this. So what some things. And this is from their frequently asked questions when it was called rail banking. Unfortunately, we're beyond that now. It says 1983 Congress amended Section 8D of the National Trail Systems Act, establishing, quote, a national policy to preserve established railroad rights-of-way for future reactivation of rail service, to protect rail transportation corridors, and to encourage energy-efficient transportation use. Now, based on this thing was just passed out and what you heard in Nick's presentation, there are 37 letters of support, and this includes Board of Supervisors, all the things that he said there. Don't you think the rail feasibility study rises to the point of really being viable to consider for just the feasibility study?
I don't want to go there. I'm trying to do something else here.
No,
come on, let's get straight. You're basically pushing us into the east-west camp, and we've got plenty of work to do.
Well,
plenty of
priorities. Well, there's folks that their interest is rail banking, and they can go pursue that all they want. And then there's folks who are focused on east-west and the feasibility study. And I don't think they need our help or opinion. They're doing a good job of pushing that ball forward. So, again, we need to focus on what is within the purview of NCRA.
Yeah. And as John says, when he looks at when he looks at our assets as he drives up from Ukiah, and he's almost ashamed to be on the NCRA. I'm on the finance committee of the NCRA. Talk about shame. I'd like to see us accomplish something through the NCRA while there still is an NCRA. Because I'm not clever enough to figure out how to run a public agency that's running in the red. It's upside down. It's underwater. And that's the situation. So there's that property out there. And I'd like to see something done with it, rather than nothing done with it. Estelle.
I'm Karen.
I'm sorry.
We had a shot across the bow a couple years ago with a storm surge event. And as someone who's concerned about rising sea levels, and this was the beginning, we've been lucky that these high tides and these significant storm events haven't done more damage to this 101 highway corridor. The fact that CalTrans is here today is great, but we need to get the Corps of Engineers in here and the Coastal Commission in here and really sit down with a community dialogue and work through this problem, because I think these diverging interests, we're all wanting the same things. And we have an opportunity to address the bay and put a railroad and a trail on top of it. And I just see, don't waste our time fighting each other. Let's work together cooperatively so we can say to the state and feds, give us some money to do this because we want to protect our bay and our transportation modality, walking, riding, driving, and railroad. I think why can't we have it all? So can we have another meeting that brings in the Corps of Engineers with a real, and ask them, why can't this happen? And what's your role in this?
Charlie made the point that the Corps of Engineers is fading. Corps of Engineers ain't what it used to be. So put the Corps of Engineers aside. In fact, programs, funding opportunities are fading right and left. And
Well, but the Corps is still an important part of the
They're the
discussion.
one who makes it happen.
There is a good start to that. The Harbor District is applying for a planning grant for a sea level rise adaptation plan that the cities of Arcata and Eureka and the county are partnering in. So I think that is the good starting point for that discussion as well.
But I think it'd be nice for us to sit down as a community and talk to the Corps and say, we have some urgent needs here and we want you to hear this. Because even a letter of support or the cooperation of the Corps will go a long way. And get the Coastal Commission part of this too, because you have to sign off on both.
Yeah,
Then we can start getting some things going forward and we can really get serious with some funding.
And we might get to that. We might get to that 47-member committee.
Those are the two people who need to be in the room.
Can I just put a clarification? The Corps of Engineers still does do projects like this. If you look down at New Orleans at the aftermath of the Hurricane Katrina, you know, they did a significant amount of rebuilding of the levee system down there. It's just, they built our jetties into Humboldt Bay out here in the area. You just don't see that type of activity out of their San Francisco office or their region.
They now review and say no to projects under an 1899 Act, but they don't build infrastructure like they used to. Like Charlie says, they rush in emergency situations.
Not only that, they're moving the kick all levies out of the federal system and make them 100% the responsibility of local agencies. That's their after effect of Katrina, is not to help local communities.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
It's to shed the liability on their assets to local communities.
Well, I was trying to wrap up by
let me finish that.
Yes, Tom, I'm sorry.
They have to be a part of the conversation, and I think that's going to come in the future, but we got a lot more property owners and other issues to deal with for this corridor. We're going to go nowhere if we continue to fight. As you brought up, once we agree on we need the highway, we need a trail, and we need the rail, then we will move forward. As if we keep trying to move forward separately at somebody else's, taking somebody else's assets and turning it into something else, we're not going to get it forward as a community. As a community, we want all three of these things, and we need to focus our energies on moving forward on all three of these things. I heard the rail operator say, I can't operate because it's not up to par. I didn't hear the rail operator say, if it was up to par right now, I couldn't operate and make money. I heard him say, it could be operational and made money if the public brought it up to the state it needs to be in. Then we lead to the trail. That's going to be public money. The issue is who owns and operates it. Nobody's going there because nobody has the money to own and operate the trail. Can, as part of the contract, a portion of the profits from the rail line be dedicated to an agency to own and operate that trail? You give me the funding to own and operate the trail, and I will recommend to the county that way the county take the leadership on getting that trail built. Right now it has no leader, it has no owner. And that's where we need to get as a community. Who's the leader and the owner? How's it going to be funded? How can we work together with CalTrans and NCRA to make it all happen?
Right. Can I involve you in the review of my draft report?
I'm giving you my draft for you.
Just dictated it. I just want to get something going. I want to get some traction and get something going at like John.
Let's wrap this up.
That was it.
Well, I want to say just a little bit more. First of all, I really sincerely want to thank everybody for attending here. We've had a lot of very key community people and organizations represented here. You know, I'd like to thank Dave Anderson for his first presentation, Merritt Perry for his presentation, a couple of weeks ago. Our presenters today, John Williams, Pete Johnston, Nick Angelo, Kim Floyd from CalTrans, and even Reese Hughes, although I didn't agree with a lot of what he said. But everybody took the time to present their perspectives, their information. I really think that this is not the end of the conversation. It's very much the beginning. We are going to have a presentation at our Eureka meeting in November. If Bill and Cliff and I get our job done of putting together the report. And I really hope that what we're seeing is really the nucleus of the community coming together and agreeing that the best way to get any of what we want is to try and get all of what we want and to try to move forward together. And as John Williams said, just to coordinate two things, the rail and the trail. It's not as simple as it sounds. And then you bring in the highway and they're on their own timeline. So how much can we make these things work together in the most complementary way where one can build on the other? That's part of the challenge. But again, I really appreciate all of you participating and look forward to seeing you here next month at our regular NCRA meeting.
Which I assume will be at the County Soup's chambers.
I believe so.
Rather than here.
And that's going to be November
the 14th, Wednesday. Yeah, let's
10 a.m.
Let's see if we can get some. Let's see if we can get some traction.
Okay, never mind. I thought there was a conflicting meeting, but I'll make sure of that. I think you're right.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it right there.
It's a wrap.
Thank you.
About 75 minutes.
Bobby Keene has worked for Frankly Freddy's for over 25 years. When Bobby finds out this family-run business is being sold to another company, his life takes a downhill turn. Don't miss this original series starring Dmitry Chikorsky and Michael Thomas, along with a cast of Humboldt County's most loved actors. Bobby Keene Corporate World is seen only on The Carol Escobar Show, Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. and Sundays at 6 p.m. on Access Humboldt Cable Channel 12.
Bobby Keene Corporate World.
Charles, I'm going down to Drago's mansion at midnight. There's something down there that will unravel these mysteries. I'm sure of it, and I can feel it in my bones. And Charles, why don't you meet me up there? I could use some help